My name is Margaret, and I'm 48 years old. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I received the call that shattered my world. Miss Margaret? This is Harold from Big Oak Pond downtown. I think we have something of yours. My heart sank before I even asked the question. I already knew. What is it? I asked, my voice shaking. A gold pocket watch engraved with "To my dearest daughter M, your loving father, H, 1985. I gasped. That belonged to my dad. I had lost my father 5 years ago. That watch was the only thing I kept. It didn't matter that it wasn't worth much in money. It was rich in memory, soaked in every hug, every late-night talk we had about faith and life and his regrets. He used to say, "A man can lose everything, Maggie, but if he keeps his word and his time, he's still a rich man." That watch was sacred. I rushed to the pawn shop, still in my office clothes, heart racing, like it knew what I was about to face. Harold stood behind the counter, a kind-eyed man with calloused hands. He placed the watch on a velvet cloth. "Do you know who brought it in?" I asked, holding back tears. He hesitated, then sighed. "It was your stepmother, along with a young man who said he was your brother." Brother. That's what he called himself. Michael, my stepbrother. We shared no blood, only pain. He was 13 when Dad married Clarissa, his mother. I was already 21, already used to having Dad to myself, already suspicious of anyone trying to steal even a piece of him. But I tried. I tried to welcome them. And then they started taking. First, it was Dad's time, then his attention, then, slowly, his legacy. After Dad died, the house, the savings, and yes, even the watch, all technically became ours. But in the hands of Clarissa, ours meant hers and her son's. I wanted nothing but that watch. I told them, begged them. Now I stood in front of Harold, my chest heavy with grief and rage. "They said they needed the money for a business," Harold added. "Something about an online investment platform." Of course they did. Michael was always looking for the next big idea. Crypto, Forex, subscription boxes, now probably NFTs. He never stuck to anything, but somehow always found new money. I stared at the watch. "Can I get it back?" Harold nodded. "I held it for you. Didn't log it in yet. I just had a feeling." My hands trembled as I took it. I could almost feel Dad's warmth in it. I thanked Harold, and before I left, I asked for a copy of the receipt. Clarissa's signature. Michael's, too. That night, I sat in the living room holding the watch, thinking of my father's voice. "Don't let greed poison the garden, Maggie. Once it does, it kills everything good." The next morning, I drove across town and knocked on Clarissa's door. She opened it, still in her silk robe, coffee in hand, acting like nothing happened. "Well, look who finally decided to visit. You could have called, you know." "I could have," I said calmly. But I figured selling off a dead man's gift without asking his daughter didn't require a phone call either. Her eyes twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled the watch from my purse. "You sold this. You and Michael." "For what, Clarissa? Another one of his dreams?" A few weeks later, things escalated faster than I imagined. Michael showed up in the news. Not for success, but for fraud. A group of investors had filed a lawsuit, accusing him of misrepresentation, misleading promises, and falsifying testimonials on the Next Vest site. The headlines were brutal. "Son of deceased banker accused of fraud." That word, banker, hit me hard. Dad hated that label. He always said, "I don't work in a bank. I serve people's trust." Now his name was being dragged through financial mud. I watched the reports in silence, my stomach twisted. Cassandra called me 2 days later. This may be our chance. If we can prove that he used your father's name and inheritance fraudulently, it strengthens our case. But part of me hesitated. Was I ready to see Michael fall apart publicly? Would Dad have wanted that? The next morning, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. It read, "Maggie, I messed up. I thought I could build something. I thought if I made it big enough, it would make him proud. But I was chasing shadows. I'm sorry for the watch. And for everything else. Michael, no excuses, no defense, just 6 lines of guilt." I didn't know what to do with it. So I called the only person who knew how to answer questions like that, Pastor James. I brought the letter, sat across from him in his dusty old office, and told him everything. He read the note, then looked at me with eyes that had seen generations of pain and grace. "Maggie, when someone repents, the Lord always listens. The question is, are you ready to forgive, even if justice still needs to happen?" I swallowed hard. What if forgiving him means letting him get away with it? "Forgiveness doesn't cancel consequences," he said. "It sets you free." He paused, then added, "Remember what Jesus said. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." I nodded slowly. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling thinking of Dad, of everything stolen, of what was still mine to protect. In the morning, I wrote a response. "Michael, I forgive you. But you still need to make things right, not with me, but with the people you lied to. If you truly want to honor Dad, start by telling the truth. Maggie." I didn't send it right away. I waited. And then the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Michael. It was Liana, the assistant from Next Vest. "Miss Dalton," she said, nervous. "Michael is stepping down. He's agreed to cooperate with the investigation." I was stunned. "He said you told him to start with truth." 2 days later, I was called into a private mediation meeting. Michael had agreed to a full disclosure. He would testify that Clarissa had pushed him to change the will while Dad was still recovering from surgery, that she convinced him it was the only way to secure the future. I walked into the cold, glass-walled conference room and saw him sitting there. He looked smaller, paler, not the arrogant man from the videos, just a tired boy caught in the storm he helped create. He stood when I entered. "Maggie," he said, voice rough. "I'm sorry for all of it." I nodded, but said nothing. The mediator began reading the statements. Clarissa was not present. Her attorney had advised her not to attend. That said everything. Michael slid a folder across the table. "These are the emails, the texts, all the records of what happened. You can use them in court." "Why now?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. He looked at me with eyes that, for the first time, felt honest. "'Cause I dreamed about him last night," he said softly. "Dad." He didn't speak. He just looked at me, and I woke up crying like a kid. I couldn't breathe. I knew I had to stop lying. I watched him closely, part of me still guarded. But another part recognized the weight of shame. He continued, "You know, he once told me something. I think he meant it for you, but he said it while I was listening. He said, 'You can inherit money, but you can't inherit integrity. That's earned every day.'" I swallowed the lump in my throat. The mediator handed us documents. Michael had officially relinquished all rights to the estate. He agreed to publicly withdraw the use of Henry Dalton's name from any business. And he would issue a statement admitting fault. It was everything I had fought for. Still, as I walked out, I felt no victory, just sorrow. The press covered it quietly. No scandal, just a sad footnote in another failed startup. But to me, it was a final act of truth. That night, I sat on my porch holding the watch again, and I whispered, "We did it, Dad." The truth came out. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves. I felt peace, real peace. The fallout was quieter than I expected. Michael disappeared from social media. The Next Best site was shut down. Investors were being reimbursed through what little assets remained, and most chose not to pursue prison time, probably out of pity. Clarissa, on the other hand, was furious. She sent me a cold typed letter. "You've ruined everything. Your father would be ashamed." I didn't reply because I knew the truth. A few weeks later, I visited my father's grave. The sky was overcast, the grass damp. I brought fresh lilies, his favorite, and knelt beside the stone. "I kept your name clean, Dad," I whispered. "It cost me, but I did it." I ran my fingers along the carved letters. Henry Dalton, a man of trust and time. I smiled. Just as I was standing, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Michael. He wore a simple jacket, no flashy watch, no camera crew. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said quietly. "It's his birthday," I replied. He nodded. "I brought something," he said. Reaching into his coat, he handed me a photograph. It was old. A picture of me, Dad, and Michael, sitting on the porch steps. I didn't even remember it. "He kept it in his desk drawer," Michael said, "right next to the watch. I found it when we were cleaning out the house." I held the photo, speechless. "I wish I'd been a better brother," he added. "You still can be," I said, surprising even myself. He looked at me with tears forming in his eyes. "Do you think he forgave me?" I paused. "I think he hoped you'd become the man you are meant to be. And I think today he'd be proud you're trying." Michael bowed his head. We stood there in silence, the three of us, one above, two below, bound not by blood, but by a shared longing for redemption. Later, at home, I placed the photograph in the same wooden box as the watch. Two symbols of what was lost and what was found. In the months that followed, I slowly returned to normal life. But I wasn't the same. Something inside me had shifted, grown quieter, deeper, stronger. I started volunteering at a local financial literacy program for seniors, helping them understand online investments, avoid scams, protect what they'd earned. It felt like a way to honor Dad. One evening, a woman named Bernice came in, 65, widowed, terrified of losing the little she had. Her grandson had convinced her to invest in a startup that guaranteed 40% monthly. I gently explained the risks. She began to cry. "They told me it was safe," she whispered. "They said I could retire in peace." I held her hand. "I've been where you are," I said. "I almost lost more than money. But the truth sets us free, even when it's painful." We filed a fraud report together. After she left, I sat alone in that quiet office, remembering the moment I held Dad's watch again and felt time realign. At church, Pastor James invited me to speak at a women's gathering. I was hesitant, but something told me it was time. I stood before 50 women and told them everything about the betrayal, the pain, the fight for my father's name, and the unexpected peace that followed. I quoted the verse from Dad's notebook. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I asked them, what are you fighting to protect? What legacy are you leaving? The room was silent. Some cried, others nodded. And I knew I wasn't just healing, I was helping others find their own healing too. Even Michael reached out again. He had taken a job at a local hardware store. No big dreams, no investors, just honest work. He sent me a text. Still earning integrity, one day at a time. I replied with a simple heart. We didn't need to rebuild everything. Just enough to not live in anger anymore. And maybe that was grace. Not perfect, but real. Summer arrived slowly, with golden evenings and the smell of cut grass. I had begun to find comfort in the ordinary again. But peace has a way of being tested. One afternoon, I received a letter from Clarissa's attorney, a formal notification. She was challenging the reinstated will, despite the confession, despite the evidence. She claims she was Henry's wife and deserves half, Cassandra explained when I brought her the document. It's legally shaky, but not impossible. I stared at the paper, anger flickering again. She had everything, and it still wasn't enough. Cassandra leaned forward. We can fight this, but I need to know. Do you want to? It'll mean court, exposure, time, emotion. I thought of the church, the classes, Bernice, Michael, and I thought of Dad. No, I said, we'll respond with the truth, but I won't fight dirty. Not for money, not even for justice. She nodded. Then we let her walk into the light herself. That Sunday, I stood again in church. The pastor preached about the prodigal son, not from the son's perspective, but the older brother's. How often, he asked, do we focus on what we deserve and forget that mercy was never fair to begin with? I closed my eyes. Maybe Clarissa would never repent. Maybe she would die bitter. But I didn't have to. That week, I wrote Clarissa a letter. You may win in court, or not, but you've already lost the only inheritance that matters. Peace. I pray one day you find it. I didn't send it to her lawyer. I sent it to her home, handwritten. No reply came, but I didn't need one. Something had shifted in me, a deep, settled certainty that no lawsuit could shake. The watch remained in its box. The house remained mine. The truth remained untouched, and I knew something was coming. A moment of clarity, of confrontation, of final release. The court date arrived on a gray, quiet Thursday. Clarissa entered the courtroom in a dark suit, her face drawn and proud as if nothing had happened. She avoided my eyes as she sat across from me. Michael was there too, not on either side, just watching. He looked like a man caught between two ghosts. The judge, a woman in her 60s, read over the files. Cassandra spoke first. Clear, factual, unshaken. Then Clarissa's lawyer stood. She was his wife, he said. She stood by him through illness, through death. She is entitled to share in his estate. No, I whispered, but not to him, to myself. Then Cassandra stood again and played the recording. Michael had agreed to one last act of truth, a sworn video testimony. On the screen, he spoke calmly. My mother pressured my stepfather, Henry Dalton, to change his will while he was on medication. He didn't want to. He told me, more than once, that Maggie was his true heir. She held his values, not just his name. The courtroom went still. Clarissa closed her eyes. The judge leaned back. I see enough, she said. This court recognizes the original will. The estate belongs to Margaret Dalton, full. A quiet breath escaped me. Relief, grief, victory. Michael stood and left the courtroom without a word. Clarissa sat motionless for a long while. Then, as people began to file out, she walked slowly toward me. I didn't move. She stopped just in front of me and said softly, "He loved you more than I ever understood." I looked into her tired eyes. "He loved us differently," I replied. "And we both failed him in different ways." She didn't argue. She just turned and walked away. And I knew that was the last time I would ever see her. Outside, the sky had cleared. I stepped into the sunlight, holding nothing but a small leather bag. Inside it, the watch. I raised it to my ear. Tick, tick. Time still moving, but this time moving with peace. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick because, in truth, I was. Not with fever or flu, but with a sickness that starts in your heart and spreads into your bones. Betrayal is like that. It clings to your ribs and whispers questions all day long. I sat at my father's old desk, the one I'd brought from the house when they let me take whatever wasn't useful. It still smelled of old cedar and pipe tobacco. I opened the drawer and pulled out the small notebook Dad used to keep. He called it his faith ledger. It wasn't about money. It was filled with scriptures, names, dates, people he prayed for, verses he clung to. I flipped through until I found a passage underlined twice. "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." That was him, always telling me that true wealth was never in the bank, but in the heart. I closed the book gently, then reached for my laptop. If Michael and Clarissa were using my father's memory to fund some half-baked venture, I needed to know what it was. It didn't take long. Next Vest, the future of personal investing, the website blared. Sleek, colorful, filled with promises and investor buzzwords. Founder, Michael Carter. Partner, Clarissa Dalton. They had even used my father's name in the About section. Inspired by the wisdom and legacy of Henry Dalton, a man who believed in the power of financial freedom. I felt a deep sting behind my eyes. That was my father's name. And this circus was not his legacy. I picked up the phone and called the number listed on the site. A young voice answered. "Next Vest, HQ, this is Liana speaking." "Hi, Liana. I'm Margaret Dalton. I'd like to know how much capital was raised by your founders." "Oh, I'm not sure I can disclose that. I'm Henry Dalton's daughter," I interrupted. "The man you're using to promote this." Silence. "I'll have someone get back to you," she said quickly and hung up. Later that day, my phone rang. "Michael, why are you calling the company?" What are you trying to do, Maggie? I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I'm protecting Dad's name. It's too late for that, he snapped. People already know. The site's live. The investors are in. Then you should pray they don't look too hard. He laughed bitterly. You've always hated me. No, I said softly. I just stopped trusting you when you started lying to everyone and calling it business. He hung up. I knew I needed advice. So I went to see Evelyn. She was my dad's sister, 73, living in a small cottage out in the hills. She was the only one who still called me Maggie Girl and made peppermint tea when I cried. She opened the door before I knocked. I saw your face in my dream last night. I knew you'd come. I hugged her tightly. They sold the watch, Aunt Evie, and now they're using his name to sell lies. She guided me inside. Your father knew this day might come. That's why he told me where he hid the letter. What letter? She handed me a weathered envelope, sealed in wax, my name written in his careful print. I sat on her old sofa and opened it. Inside was a short letter. Maggie, if you're reading this, they've probably done something foolish. I left the watch for you because I know you value more than money. But if Clarissa and the boy come for the rest, know this. I trusted the law and the Lord to do what's right, and I trust you to carry the truth. Love, Dad. Tears blurred the words. There's more, Aunt Evie said. She pulled out a folder. Inside were old estate documents I'd never seen, an earlier will, one in which I was the primary beneficiary, not Clarissa, not Michael. I thought the other will was final, I whispered. They pressured him to change it after his surgery, she said. He didn't want to. He told me he was confused, medicated, but he was tired of arguing. The rage returned, but this time, it came with clarity. This wasn't just about the watch. This was about Dad's legacy, his name, his truth. And now I had the fire to protect it. The following week, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Cassandra Lee, sharp, calm, and quietly fierce. I handed her the letter, the old will, and a copy of the pawn receipt. She scanned the pages without saying much, only nodding slowly. This is more than a case, she finally said. This is theft, and possibly fraud. I didn't care about suing them for money. I want two things, I told her. I want them to stop using my father's name to sell lies, and I want the truth to be known. She leaned forward. Then we'll start with a cease and desist to take his name off that website. After that, we reopen the estate under the original will. It was a lot, and emotionally, I wasn't ready. But spiritually, I felt a stirring, like something sacred had been trampled, and it was my job to protect it. Meanwhile, Michael doubled down. Next Vest started gaining traction. He posted videos online, calling himself a new voice of generational wealth. Clarissa stood by him like a silent queen, smiling, nodding. They were pulling in older folks, men and women my parents' age, promising them a new way to retire rich. I couldn't stand it. I watched a video where Michael said, "My late father always told me, if you control your money, you control your destiny." Lies. My father never said that. I slammed the laptop shut. That weekend, I went to church. I hadn't been in months, maybe years. The pews smelled like old wood and lemon polish. The hymns, "A year has passed." Sometimes I still wake up expecting a fight, expecting another letter, another betrayal. But there's only quiet now. I kept the house. I turned one of the spare rooms into a study, filled it with Dad's books, his old radio, his favorite armchair, a place where time stands still and memories speak louder than regrets. Michael writes now and then. He sends postcards, simple ones. Learning carpentry, building something real, still keeping my word. He never asks for money, and I never ask for explanations. We found something better than blame, distance with dignity. Clarissa moved to another city. I heard she started working with a legal firm, helping with estate documents. Irony, or perhaps her own journey towards something honest. I don't know, and I no longer need to. Last week, I brought the watch to church. Pastor James asked if I'd share one final time. I held it up and told them, this little piece of gold was never about money. It was about a man who believed in honor, in truth, in God, above all things. I paused, then said, if you still have something sacred, hold it close, because in the end, we're not remembered by what we built, but by what we refused to sell. They stood and clapped, and I felt it. Dad's presence, not in the watch, but in me. He had passed on more than an heirloom. He had passed on a compass, and I would follow it all my days.